2004 Jetta with a noisy wheel bearing. When steering slightly left, the noise is exaggerated, which usually means that the weight of the vehicle shifts to the right side and then the right bearing gets loaded. In this case though, it's the left side that's noisy, and it depends again on the position of the hub, how it's sitting in the wheel bearing, or how it's applying the load on the wheel bearing. In the straight ahead position, you don't hear a wheel bearing noise. When turning to the right, you don't hear it only when you turn to the left. If you go too far to the left, it shifts even more and it gets quiet again. So it's a really weird one. It's opposite of what I usually see. But in terms of identifying, placing a screwdriver on the steering knuckle here and then place your ear against it. I'll see if the microphone can pick it up. Probably not, but I can feel it and I can hear it crunching. Whereas on this side, there's nothing. You can also put your hand on the coil spring and feel for vibration. Any vibration down here will resonate through the steering knuckle, and I can feel it on the coil spring. So we're going to pull this bearing out and also check for bearing play by wiggling the wheel. Wow, look at that. See, my focus was first on describing the symptom rather than even checking. Usually I check the wheel first. That's definitely loose. Either the bolt or the nut is loose, or the wheel bearing is loose. Well, the wheel bearing is obviously loose, but if the nut isn't tight, then that's why. Just for fun, we're going to see if this thing is loose. Yeah, it definitely was loose. Still going to replace it at this point. Going to get a new nut as well. Already got a couple of wheel bearing videos, but I think with the lighting, different camera, and different commentary, and as you saw, different beginning, I think these videos will still be useful to people. Use power tools where you can. Totally up to you. Sliders sticking in the boot, so definitely make sure to loop those up afterwards. Come on. It's somewhat dry. Don't forget to disconnect the wheel speed, no, not the wheel speed sensor, the wear indicator. The inner brake pad has a wear sensor on it. Push together, peel back, and pull. If that doesn't work, lift the retaining tab and pull apart. And you can move the caliper, hang it up however you want. you're going to want to mark the ball joint bolt location. It's just to try to keep the alignment fairly close. As you can see, the holes are slightly slotted, so that allows for camber adjustment. I think you can hear that. There's a bit of a growling there. I use a slide hammer. You can use a press, whatever works for you. But I gotta now put the ball joint back in, at least in one slot, so that the whole steering knuckle doesn't move when I use the slide hammer. You get yourself a big ass slide hammer, and this thing will pop out like butter. Remove the retaining clip. You have to be careful, it can go flying. Just pry one edge out and then you can walk the clip out. And remove the ball joint bolts again. Okay, and then you use a wheel bearing puller. Place the puller plate on the inside. You have to make sure that the cup is big enough to accept the bearing. And then you just tighten the nut. The plate will pull the bearing out of the steering knuckle into the cup. Just gotta wait till my boss is off the phone. Use a bit of sandpaper to clean the inside of the bore. You can also use an abrasive disc. Depending on the wheel bearing kits you buy, the bearing will come with the ball joint bolts, it'll come with the retaining nut, and it'll come with the new retaining C-clip, or you can just get the bearing by itself, get the nut by itself, and get the hub by itself. Many options. And just use some grease to lube up the bore. On the Mark IVs, these bearings can go in either way, it doesn't matter. On different generation vehicles, there might be a ABS tone ring inside the wheel bearing, and the wheel bearing will look the same left to right. So what you have to do is you have to use a magnetic pad like this that recognizes the magnetic tone ring, and then that way you can position it, because if the ABS sensor is on the inside and you place the magnetic tone ring on the outside, the ABS sensor is not going to work. So all this is a film with metal particles in it. It's just like an Etch-a-Sketch, and when you take a magnet, you can see it disturbs the field, or it disturbs the powder that's in there. Okay, since there's a raised lip on the inside, you have to push the bearing in. In this case, what I do is I pull it in. I just reverse this setup. Just want to make sure that it starts straight, nice and flush, otherwise it'll start binding. And then you just pull it in until you hear a change in pitch, and that means that the bearing has bottomed out against the inside edge. Sorry, I got interrupted. So then you just reverse the tool. I like to rotate the C-clip to make sure that it's in the groove. Loop the new hub a little bit. To press the hub in, you have to support the bearing on the inside, on the inner race. So what I do is I take one of these pushing plates and I put an inner race on it, and you can see it fits right up against the inner race. So you feed the puller through with the hub, put the puller plate with the inner race on the back. And just like before, you just got to make sure that everything is fairly centered, so that everything pulls in straight. Otherwise it'll start going at an angle and it can start binding. So just get everything snug, and then you can take a look. To make sure everything's sitting nice. You can also spin the hub to see if it's wobbling. And then same thing, you pull the hub in until you hear a change in pitch. Nice and quiet. You want to make sure that the wheel bearing, the ABS speed sensor gap is not too big. If it's too big, you're gonna have to shim out the tone ring. You can remove the screws, put some little washers in behind. There's 3 of them, and then that shims it out. But this one looks good. I think the service manual has a specification for the gap, in which case you just use a feeler gauge to see what it is. Assemble everything else in reverse of removal.